Sandra Bullock felt something strange in her chest on that quiet morning, a feeling she could not explain, a feeling that made her heart beat in a way she had not felt in years, almost like a warning or a whisper that something important was coming her way. She stood near her kitchen window as warm sunlight entered the room, filling the air with a soft glow that made everything look calm, even though her thoughts were anything but calm. She had spent the last few weeks trying to focus on her work and her children and her quiet routines. Yet something inside her kept pulling her attention back to a single thought she had tried to avoid for so long. She wondered if people truly knew how memories could appear out of nowhere and change the direction of an entire morning. Because as she stared at the slow movement of the trees outside, she suddenly remembered the last time she saw Keanu Reeves, and that single memory was enough to make her steps pause, her breath slow down, and her heart feel heavier than before. She had known Keanu for many years, through laughter and long filming days and moments of kindness that stayed with her far longer than any award show or any red carpet memory. Yet there was something about their last meeting that she could not forget. It was not dramatic or loud or filled with shocking words. Instead, it was quiet, painfully quiet, and that silence was what stayed with her. There were times during the night when she wondered if she could have said something different, something comforting, something brave that might have given him a reason to stay a little longer, even if it was just a moment. Ever since that day, she carried the weight of unspoken words that rested on her shoulders like a silent stone. As Sandra moved through her home, she tried to distract herself by checking her phone, organizing a few papers, and preparing coffee. Yet everything she did felt slow and unfocused because her mind kept drifting back to that same memory that refused to leave her alone. She told herself she had work to finish, calls to answer, and schedules to follow, but none of those things mattered at that moment. Something inside her kept insisting that the past was not finished, that something unresolved was returning, and she could not push that feeling away no matter how hard she tried. She did not know why she suddenly felt this sense of expectation, but she could not deny the truth that her instincts were rarely wrong. She thought about the way Keanu had walked away from her during their last encounter, not out of anger or disappointment, but with a sadness she could not fully understand at the time. She had watched him leave with his shoulders slightly tense and his head lowered as if he carried a burden he did not want anyone to see. She wanted to follow him then, but something held her back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was confusion, maybe it was the belief that he needed space. But now she wondered if she should have gone after him because deep inside she knew something had broken inside him that day, something fragile that he tried to hide behind his gentle smile. The memory felt sharper now, almost too clear, almost fresh in a way that made her chest tighten. She could still feel the weight of the silence between them, the silence that spoke louder than anything they could have said. She told herself many times that he would reach out when he was ready, that he would return when life allowed him. Yet months passed and everything stayed the same. The distance grew thicker, and even though she tried to accept it, she never fully could. Sometimes she wondered if she had done something wrong, if she had missed a sign, if she had failed to notice a deeper pain he carried. But Sandra was not the kind of person who blamed others easily. Instead, she blamed herself for not trying harder, for not asking the difficult questions, for not holding on to a friendship that meant more to her than she admitted out loud. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her, and she turned to see her assistant entering the room with a hesitant expression. The hesitation instantly caught her attention because it was rare for her assistant to look worried so early in the morning. Sandra asked if everything was all right, expecting something small like a scheduling issue or a delayed meeting. But instead, her assistant breathed slowly and said there was someone unexpected waiting outside. Sandra felt her heartbeat quicken without knowing why. She asked who it was, and her assistant answered with a name that made the entire room fall still. Keanu Reeves. The air seemed to shift around her as if the world had paused for a second to repeat the name inside her mind. She blinked slowly, almost unsure if she had heard correctly. Many months had passed since their last meeting, and she never imagined he would return without warning. She felt her knees weaken slightly, though she kept her posture steady. She took a deep breath as she tried to process the sudden news, and in that moment every memory, every unanswered question, every emotion she tried to bury suddenly rose inside her all at once. She asked her assistant if he looked all right, if he said why he came, if he seemed calm or troubled. But her assistant simply said he did not explain anything. He only asked to see her. Sandra nodded slowly, her mind racing in 100 different directions at once. She wondered why he returned without calling first. She wondered if something serious happened. She wondered if he was hurt. She wondered if he was leaving again, and this time she feared it might be forever. She felt that cold wave of unanswered fear run through her as she stood silently in her kitchen. She walked toward the front door in a slow, careful pace, each step filled with both hope and worry. She wanted to see him, yet something inside her felt a strange kind of fear, not fear of him, but fear of what he might say, fear of what this sudden visit meant. The moment she reached her door, she hesitated for a brief second as she prepared herself emotionally. She placed her hand on the doorknob, inhaled deeply, and opened the door. Keanu stood in front of her with the same calm posture she remembered so well, yet there was something different in his eyes, something gentler but also heavier. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, tired in a way that came from carrying emotions for too long. He offered her a small smile, one that looked soft but uncertain, as if he did not know how she would receive him after so much time had passed. The moment their eyes met, Sandra felt something shift inside her, something warm, something familiar, something painful yet comforting at the same time. She whispered his name in a quiet voice that trembled just slightly. He responded in a soft tone that carried a mixture of relief and sadness. He told her he hoped he was not disturbing her morning, and she immediately told him he never disturbed her. She stepped aside and invited him in, though she noticed he hesitated before entering, almost like he was unsure if he should cross the doorway. When he finally stepped inside, the energy in the room changed again. Sandra felt every unspoken emotion return between them, filling the air with a tension that was gentle but strong. She wanted to ask him everything at once. Where he had been, why he left so suddenly, why he never called, why he looked so heavy-hearted. But she held her questions back because she knew he needed space to speak at his own pace. Keanu looked around her home slowly, as if he missed the warmth it held. He tucked his hands into his pockets and took a deep breath before speaking. He said he returned because there were things he should have said before, things he kept buried, things that became heavier with time. He said he owed her honesty, and he owed himself closure, and he needed to come back before life moved forward in a direction he could no longer change. Sandra felt her heart stop for a moment as she tried to understand what he meant. Closure, direction, change. Those words carried weight, a kind of weight that made her afraid of what he might reveal next. She stepped closer to him, her voice gentle as she asked if he was all right. Keanu looked down at the floor before lifting his eyes back to her with a softness she rarely saw in him. He said he was all right, but there were things happening in his life that he could not carry alone anymore. He said he did not want to push people away again, especially not her. The depth in his voice made her chest tighten. She knew something serious was behind his words, but she did not know what. She reached out and gently touched his arm, a gesture that made him pause and close his eyes for a second, as if the simple touch gave him strength. He whispered her name softly and said he was sorry for disappearing. He said he thought leaving was the best way to protect the people he cared about, but now he realized he only created more distance and more hurt. Sandra felt a mix of relief and confusion swirl inside her. She wanted to tell him he did not need to apologize. She wanted to tell him she understood. She wanted to tell him she missed him. Yet all she managed to say was that he should sit down and talk to her because she was there for him always. He nodded, though the heaviness in his shoulders did not disappear. They sat together in her living room, facing each other, yet something still hung in the air between them. Sandra watched him closely, noticing every small detail, every hesitation, every breath he took. Keanu looked like a man carrying a secret that changed the direction of his days. She waited quietly, giving him space, giving him time, giving him respect. Finally, he lifted his head, and the moment his eyes met hers, she felt her body stiffen with anticipation. He said there was a reason he returned today, a reason he could not delay any longer, a reason that connected deeply to their last conversation and the silence that followed. And then he took a slow breath and said words that made Sandra freeze in place, words that made the entire room suddenly feel colder, heavier, and absolutely still. He told her he came back for one last visit because something in his life had changed in a way he could no longer hide. Before she could ask anything, before she could speak a single word, he looked away and whispered that this might be the last time he would be able to see her like this. Sandra felt her entire world stop. And the reason he returned was something she was not ready to hear. The room felt heavier the moment Keanu spoke those words. And for a long, silent second, Sandra could not move or breathe properly, because her mind was trying to understand what he meant. She felt a slow, cold wave move across her chest, a wave that made her heart beat harder than before. She looked at Keanu carefully, searching for any small sign that he was exaggerating or that she misunderstood him, but his expression told her the truth. This was not a casual visit. This was not a simple apology. This was not a conversation about old memories or long-lost moments. This was something else, something deeper, something that carried a weight she was not prepared for. She asked him softly what he meant, her voice calm yet unsteady, and Keanu lowered his gaze for a moment as if gathering the strength to continue. He placed his hands together slowly, holding them tightly as if the pressure helped him stay grounded. He said that life had changed suddenly, in ways he did not expect, and in ways that forced him to look at everything differently. He said he spent months trying to deal with it alone because he thought he could handle everything quietly without troubling anyone, especially her. But now he realized silence only made things heavier, and the weight of carrying it alone had become too much for him. Sandra felt her breath become shallow because she could sense the pain behind his words. She moved closer to him without thinking, her instinct urging her to be near him, to give him support, to let him know he was not alone. She asked him again in a soft tone if he was sick or if something bad had happened. The question made Keanu lift his head slightly, and she saw a kind of sadness in his eyes that she had not seen before, a sadness that came from deep inside him, the kind that grows quietly over time. Instead of answering immediately, he looked around her living room as if searching for a moment of courage in the familiar surroundings. He told her he had been traveling a lot, not for work, but to escape his thoughts. He said he walked through cities without purpose, stayed in hotels without comfort, and kept telling himself that everything would make sense eventually. But nothing made sense, nothing improved, and nothing eased the feeling inside him that something important was slipping away from his life. Sandra listened quietly, her entire being focused on him. She felt an ache building in her chest as she watched him struggle to find words that matched his feelings. She could tell he was not only carrying emotional pain, but also guilt, fear, and a deep sense of responsibility that made everything heavier. She placed her hand on his quietly, giving him a small comfort that made him inhale deeply. He turned his palms slightly so their hands could rest together, and that simple connection brought a tiny warmth into the heavy moment. Keanu finally looked at her directly, and his eyes revealed a truth she had hoped never to see. He told her he was not dying, but he was facing something that made his future uncertain. He said he received news that forced him to rethink everything, including his relationships, his commitments, and the people he allowed close to him. He said he did not come to her because he wanted pity or sympathy. He came because she was someone who always understood him without needing explanations, someone who always offered kindness without judgment, someone who always made him feel seen even in his quietest moments. The sincerity in his voice made Sandra feel her eyes grow warm, but she held her emotions steady because she knew he needed her calm more than her tears. She asked him gently what exactly changed, what news made him so unsure of the future. He took a long, slow breath and said he received an offer that would require him to leave the country for a long time, possibly years. It was an offer related to a film project he had been waiting for, a project that connected to his personal dreams and long-buried promises. He said he planned to accept it, but accepting it meant leaving behind the people he cared for, including her. Sandra felt the room tilt for a moment because she did not expect that answer. She had prepared herself for something worse, something far more painful. Yet this answer still hurt her in a different way, a softer but deeper way that touched the parts of her heart she never fully acknowledged. She asked him why he spoke about the visit as if it were his last. If he was only leaving for work, he could return, he could call, he could stay connected, but his expression did not match a simple goodbye. Keanu explained that the project required him to work in a remote country, isolated from communication, surrounded by strict schedules, physical training, and emotional preparation. It was a role that demanded complete commitment, and once filming began, he would not have access to the outside world for months at a time. He said he feared that once he left, life would move on without him, and he was not sure if he would return the same person he was now. He said he wanted to see her before everything changed because she deserved the truth, and he could not leave without saying the words he held inside for too long. Sandra felt her throat tighten because she could sense there was more he was not saying. She could feel it in the way his voice trembled slightly and the way he kept avoiding her eyes. She leaned in closer and told him gently that he could tell her anything, that she was listening, and that she was not going anywhere. Her kindness seemed to soften something inside him. He looked at her again with a vulnerability she rarely saw in him, a vulnerability he usually hid behind his calm nature. He said he did not leave months ago because he stopped caring. He left because he cared too much. He said he needed to understand his own feelings before he could face her again. He said he struggled with emotions he could not control, emotions that made him fear he might complicate her life. He admitted that every time he saw her, he felt something that made him question everything he believed about timing, distance, and the walls he kept around his heart. Sandra froze, and the silence between them grew thick again. Keanu continued in a soft voice, saying that he returned today not only for closure, but because he realized he did not want to leave without telling her the truth. He said he owed her honesty, even if it changed nothing. He said he cared for her more deeply than he expected, and that truth had become impossible to carry alone. The words struck her with a force she did not expect. She felt her entire body react, her breath catching, her heart tightening, her thoughts spinning in every direction. She looked at him with eyes that were softer but more overwhelmed than before. She whispered his name slowly, almost afraid of where this moment was leading. Keanu held her gaze with a steady sadness in his eyes. He said he knew the timing was wrong. He knew life was complicated. He knew their friendship was delicate. But he also knew he could not walk away again without telling her what he felt, because leaving without speaking the truth would haunt him for the rest of his life. Sandra did not know what to say. She wanted to speak, yet she feared her voice might break. She felt tears form slowly, not tears of pain, but tears of emotion so deep she could not stop them. She wiped them quickly, not wanting him to worry, but he saw them anyway. He reached out gently and touched her hand again, and she felt a warmth that traveled through her entire arm. He whispered that he did not expect her to say anything. He did not want her to feel pressured. He only wanted her to know the truth before he stepped into a future he could not fully control. The room grew quiet again as they sat together, both processing the weight of the moment. Outside the window, the world looked calm, but inside the room everything felt fragile and uncertain. Sandra finally took a long breath and asked him a simple question in a soft voice. She asked him what he truly wanted from her right now in this moment before he disappeared into a new chapter. Keanu closed his eyes for a second, gathering his thoughts, and then looked at her with a depth that made her heart rise painfully. He said he wanted to spend one day with her before he left. Just one day. One last day that they would remember forever. A day that would not be touched by cameras, interviews, schedules, or the noise of the world. A day that belonged only to them. And when Sandra heard those words, she felt her breath stop completely, because she knew a moment like that could change everything. And she also knew she could not say no. The moment Keanu said he wanted one day with her, Sandra felt something inside her shift in a way she could not explain with simple words. It was not fear and it was not confusion. It was something deeper, something warm and painful at the same time, something that came from a place she had been trying to ignore for months. She looked at him carefully, studying the quiet sincerity in his eyes, the hesitation in his posture, and the fragile hope hidden behind his calm expression. She realized he was not asking for a simple, friendly moment. He was asking for something meaningful, something final, something that might leave a mark on both their lives long after he walked away. She breathed slowly, trying to steady herself before answering, because she knew that whatever she agreed to today would shape everything that followed. She asked him softly why that day mattered so much, and Keanu took a deep breath as if searching for the right words. He told her that life had taught him how fragile time was, and how quickly people disappeared without warning. He said he did not want regret to live in the quiet corners of his heart. He wanted to leave with a memory strong enough to hold on to during the long months ahead, and the only person he wanted to share that memory with was her. Sandra felt tears gather again, but she blinked them back, refusing to let her emotions overwhelm the moment. She asked him what he wanted the day to be like, and Keanu responded with surprising honesty. He said he wanted it to feel peaceful, simple, and real. No cameras, no pressure, no work, no expectations. He wanted to walk, talk, laugh, and breathe without the weight of unresolved emotions between them. He wanted to give her the truth he had carried silently, and he wanted to understand her truth as well. The sincerity in his voice made something inside Sandra soften. She felt her heart open slightly, in a way she had not allowed in a very long time. She nodded quietly and told him she would give him the day he asked for. The relief in his expression was immediate, and it touched her more deeply than she expected. He exhaled slowly, almost as if he had been holding his breath for months. They decided to start the day as soon as possible. Sandra asked if he wanted to rest or if he needed time to gather his thoughts. But Keanu shook his head gently and said he wanted to begin now because he feared waiting would only make leaving harder. She agreed with a soft smile and told him she would change and meet him outside in a few minutes. As she walked to her room, Sandra felt her emotions swirling inside her like a quiet storm. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, allowing herself a moment to breathe. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw a mixture of fear, tenderness, and confusion staring back at her. She wondered how one man could still have such an effect on her after all the years they had known each other. She wondered what this day would bring, and what the final moment of it would feel like when he walked away again. As she dressed, memories of their past began to surface. She remembered long nights on film sets when they talked about life with a depth she rarely shared with anyone else. She remembered moments when he surprised her with kindness she did not expect. She remembered quiet gestures that stayed in her mind long after the day ended. And now she wondered if he carried the same memories, if he felt the same weight of unspoken feelings she had tried so hard to hide. When she returned to the front door, Keanu was waiting outside her home, leaning softly against his car. He looked peaceful and thoughtful at the same time, his hands resting loosely in his pockets as he stared at the sky. When he noticed her, he smiled gently, a smile that held warmth but also a quiet sadness. She approached him slowly, and the moment they stood side by side, she felt the familiar comfort of his presence settle around her. They drove without speaking for a while, letting the silence create space between them, not as a barrier, but as a gentle breathing room. Keanu finally asked her where she wanted to go first, and Sandra answered honestly that she did not care where they went. The destination did not matter. What mattered was the time they shared. That answer made him nod softly, and he told her he knew the perfect place to start. He drove toward a hill overlooking the city, a place surrounded by trees and quiet roads. Sandra looked around in surprise because she had never been there before, yet it felt calm and safe, almost like the world had softened its noise to allow them a peaceful moment. They stepped out of the car and walked toward the edge of the hill where the entire city spread out below them, glowing softly under the afternoon light. Sandra felt the gentle wind brush against her face, and for a moment she allowed herself to forget the heaviness that brought him here. Keanu stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed but thoughtful. She turned to him and asked when he discovered this place, and he told her he found it years ago during a difficult time in his life. He said he came here whenever he needed clarity or silence, and sometimes the city lights at night helped him breathe again when everything else felt overwhelming. Sandra looked at him with quiet understanding and realized this was not just a place he liked. It was a place he trusted, and bringing her here meant something far more meaningful than simple sightseeing. They walked slowly through the open area as Keanu shared stories from the past few months. Stories filled with travel, wandering thoughts, lonely nights, and the search for answers he never found. Sandra listened with gentle patience, understanding the deeper truth hidden in his words. He had been lost, emotionally and mentally, and now he was finally allowing someone to see behind the calm mask he always wore. She told him about her own struggles, the ones she kept hidden behind her smiles and her responsibilities. She spoke about the guilt she felt for not reaching out sooner, the confusion she carried after he disappeared, and the tiny ache she felt every time she remembered their last moment. Keanu listened closely, never interrupting, never drifting away from her words. His eyes softened as she spoke, and she could feel him absorbing every emotion she shared. Their walk became longer than expected as they moved deeper into the quiet landscape. At one point they found a bench near a group of tall trees, and they sat down together. The light around them grew warmer as the sun began to lower slightly, painting the sky in soft gold. Sandra felt a strange comfort sitting beside him in the silence, a comfort she had not felt in a long time. Keanu spoke again, this time with a more vulnerable tone. He told her that he had spent many nights wondering what could have happened if he had stayed longer the last time they met. He wondered if they could have talked deeper. He wondered if he could have opened up sooner. He wondered if he should have never walked away in the first place. He admitted that he had felt something strong that day, something he was not prepared to face, which was why he left so quickly. The confession made Sandra's breath catch. She felt her heart respond in a way she tried to control but could not. She turned slightly to look at him, and he met her gaze with a softness that held something unspoken, something powerful, something delicate. She asked him quietly what he felt at that time, and Keanu hesitated for a long moment before answering. He swallowed softly, then said he felt a connection that frightened him because it was too real and too familiar. He said it made him want to stay, and that desire scared him more than anything. Sandra felt her chest grow heavier as she listened, because she remembered feeling the exact same thing, yet she never admitted it, not even to herself. She took a slow breath and told him she felt the same connection, and that was why watching him walk away was one of the hardest moments she experienced in years. The honesty between them deepened, and the silence that followed felt full instead of empty. They both sat quietly, absorbing the truth that had lived unspoken for so long. Then Keanu reached into his jacket pocket with a slow movements and held something small wrapped in a cloth. Sandra looked at the object with curiosity, and before she could ask, he placed it gently in her hand. The moment she opened the cloth, she froze completely. Her breath vanished, her fingers trembled, and her eyes widened as she stared at what he had brought for her. It was something she never expected, something deeply meaningful, something from their past, and something that carried a message she was not ready to understand. When Sandra opened the small cloth and saw what Keanu placed in her hands, the world around her seemed to pause in a slow, heavy silence that felt almost unreal. Her breath slipped away as her eyes focused on the object resting in her palm, and for a long moment she could not find a single word to speak. It was a tiny silver charm shaped like a star, a charm she had completely forgotten about until the moment she saw it again, a charm that came from a day so old yet so special that the memory hit her like a wave she was not ready for. She remembered the charm instantly, remembered the day she wore it on set during their filming years ago, remembered how it fell off her bracelet during a long night shoot, and remembered how she laughed when she realized it was gone. She assumed it was lost forever because the location was large and filled with props and cables and chaos. She never knew Keanu picked it up quietly, kept it gently, and carried it with him for all those years. She looked up at him with wide eyes, her voice trembling as she asked why he kept it, why he held onto something so small, why he protected a memory she had let slip away. Keanu looked at the charm with a soft expression, his eyes filled with something deep and warm. He said he found it on the ground and wanted to return it at first, but something told him to keep it for a moment longer. Then days passed, then weeks, then years, and he realized he kept it because it reminded him of a connection he could never fully explain. Sandra felt her throat tighten as she listened to him. She looked at the charm again, her fingers trembling lightly as she traced its shape. She remembered the joy of that old moment, the laughter they shared that night, the way he always made even the longest filming days feel lighter. She asked him softly if he kept it all this time, and Keanu nodded slowly, his voice low and steady. He told her that he carried it during difficult days, during long trips, during quiet nights when he felt alone, and somehow the tiny charm brought him a strange comfort. It reminded him of something pure and familiar, something he never wanted to lose. The confession touched her in a way she did not expect. She felt tears gather slowly in her eyes, but she blinked them away because she wanted to hear every word he spoke without letting emotion cloud the moment. She asked him if he returned the charm now because he no longer wanted it, and Keanu shook his head firmly. He said he returned it because he wanted her to know the truth before he disappeared into his new path. He said holding on to it felt selfish, and he believed she deserved to know how much that tiny memory meant to him. Sandra closed the cloth gently and held the charm against her heart for a brief second, feeling its cold surface warm under her touch. She felt overwhelmed by the meaning behind it, by the years he kept it, by the emotions he hid quietly in the background of his life. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small for the depth of the moment. Instead, she reached for his hand slowly, and when he allowed her fingers to touch his, she held on to him with a softness that carried every unspoken truth she kept inside her heart. Keanu did not pull away. Instead, he let his hand settle naturally with hers, and Sandra could feel the quiet tension in his fingers, a tension that held both fear and longing. She asked him gently if he ever planned to tell her about the charm before today, and he admitted that he tried many times but always found a reason to remain silent. He said he feared she might take it lightly or feel uncomfortable or misunderstand his intention. He said he feared losing the quiet connection they shared, even if it only lived in the background of their lives. The honesty made her breathe deeper. She told him softly that she never wanted him to hide anything from her. She reminded him that trust was something they built over years and that she valued him far more than he realized. He listened quietly, his eyes softening with every word she spoke. He said he believed her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight on his chest lighten a little. They sat on the bench for a long time without speaking, letting the truth settle gently between them. The sky grew warmer, turning shades of soft gold and pale pink as the sun lowered slowly. The world around them felt peaceful in a way that made Sandra wish the moment would never end. After a long silence, Keanu stood slowly and offered his hand for her to stand with him. She placed her hand in his, and they continued walking through the quiet hill as if the day belonged only to them. Each step felt slower and more meaningful, as if time itself had softened its pace to allow them a moment they both needed deeply. As they walked, Sandra asked him quietly about the project he was leaving for. She wanted to understand the world he was stepping into, the commitment he carried, the future that felt so uncertain. Keanu explained the details carefully, telling her about the long training, the isolation, the emotional intensity, and the physical demands. He said he was grateful for the opportunity, but scared of the distance it would create between him and the people he cared about. Sandra listened thoughtfully and asked if he feared the distance with her the most. The question made him stop walking. He turned to her slowly, his expression filled with vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. He said yes, he feared that distance more than anything else. He said he feared losing her quietly while he was gone, feared life shifting in ways he could not control, feared returning to find that she had moved on emotionally from the connection that lived quietly between them. The honesty brought a warm ache to her chest. She stepped closer and told him she was not someone who forgot people she cared about. She told him she was not someone who replaced connections easily or allowed memories to fade without reason. She said her heart did not move that fast, and he was not someone she could ever forget. Keanu breathed slowly, his shoulders relaxing as if her words offered him a comfort he had needed for a long time. He whispered that he wished he had known that sooner because it might have changed everything months ago. Sandra smiled softly and told him that sometimes people learn truths at the exact moment they are meant to, not earlier, not later. They continued walking until they reached a small open field where the sunlight touched the grass gently. Keanu stopped and looked at the ground for a moment before speaking again. He said there was one more reason he came to her today, a reason he had not yet shared, a reason that made this day even more important. Sandra felt a nervous warmth rise inside her. She asked him quietly what the reason was, but Keanu hesitated. He breathed slowly, almost painfully, as if forcing himself to speak a truth he kept hidden for far too long. He looked at her deeply, his eyes filled with emotions she could not fully name. Then he told her that during the months he stayed away, he wrote something for her, something he never planned to show, something he kept hidden, something that revealed everything he felt. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a folded notebook page, worn and creased from being carried for too long. Then he held it out to her with trembling fingers. And when Sandra accepted the page and slowly opened it, her heart froze completely. Because the words on that page were not simple. They were raw. They were honest. And they revealed a truth he never said out loud, a truth that changed the entire meaning of his return. The paper in Sandra's hands felt fragile, almost too fragile for the weight of the moment. And as she unfolded it slowly, she felt a trembling in her chest that grew stronger with every passing second. The handwriting on the page was Keanu's, careful and steady, yet she could see the uneven pressure in some of the lines, the places where emotion had changed the movement of his pen. She knew immediately that whatever she was about to read was something he had written in a moment of raw honesty, a moment when he allowed his heart to speak without filters or fear. Keanu watched her quietly as she opened the paper fully. He stood still, his hands tucked gently into his pockets, but she could see the subtle tension in his shoulders and the nervous stillness in his breathing. He looked like a man who had surrendered every protective wall he had ever built, standing open and vulnerable in front of the one person whose opinion mattered to him in ways he could not easily explain. Sandra lowered her eyes to the page and began to read slowly, her breath tightening as each line pulled her deeper into the truth he carried. The letter was not long, but it was heavy with emotion. He wrote about the day he walked away from her months ago, the day he pretended to be calm even though something inside him broke quietly when he left her standing there in silence. He wrote about the way her voice stayed in his mind during long nights, about the way her laughter echoed through memories he could not let go of, and about the way her kindness stayed with him even when he tried to push his feelings aside. He wrote that he never planned to fall this deeply, never planned to feel so much, never planned to care in a way that frightened him. He wrote that he feared ruining what they had, feared placing weight on her life, feared reaching a point where he needed her more than he had the right to. And then came the final line, the one that made her entire body freeze. He wrote that he loved her, not in a loud, dramatic way, not in a desperate way, but in a quiet, deep way that grew slowly over the years until he could no longer pretend it was something small. Sandra felt her vision blur slightly as her eyes filled with a warm sting. She covered her mouth with her hand for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. She read the final lines again, slowly, letting the words press gently into her heart. When she finally looked up, Keanu was watching her with a level of vulnerability she had never seen in him. His eyes held a mixture of fear, hope, and quiet surrender. He swallowed softly and asked her if she was all right. His voice was steady, but she could hear the almost hidden tremble beneath it. She nodded slowly, though her emotions felt tangled inside her. She held the paper gently against her chest and walked a few steps closer to him, stopping just a breath away. She asked him softly when he wrote it. He looked down for a moment and said he wrote it on a night when he realized running away from the truth was hurting him more than facing it. He said he never planned to show her the letter. He only carried it as a way to release the emotions he could not express out loud. He said he returned today because he realized that leaving again without being honest would take away a chance he might never get back. Sandra felt her heart swell painfully inside her. She wanted to speak, but she needed a moment to gather her thoughts because the weight of the truth was overwhelming. She walked past him gently, needing a few steps of space, and he let her go without moving. He understood she needed to breathe, needed to process, needed to feel the moment fully before she spoke. She stood near the tall trees, looking at the sky as the warm, golden light flickered across her face. She felt the quiet of the moment surround her, the kind that holds emotion without rushing it. She inhaled deeply and tried to calm the pounding of her heart. She realized that she also carried something inside her, something she never admitted, something she ignored because she felt it was safer that way, something that grew quietly over the years just like his feelings. She turned back to him slowly, her eyes softer now, her voice steadier. She walked toward him until they stood close enough to feel the warmth of each other's presence. She held the letter gently and told him the truth in a voice that trembled with emotion she could no longer hide. She told him that she cared for him too, far more than she ever allowed herself to admit. She said her feelings frightened her as well, because he was someone she respected deeply, someone she admired, someone she trusted in ways she did not trust many people. She said she did not want to risk losing him or complicating their lives. But the truth was that she felt something strong too, something that lived inside her quietly, growing with every shared moment and every long pause between them. Keanu listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word as if each one was a piece of his own heart returning to him. He asked her softly why she never said anything before. Sandra answered with honesty that she thought he did not feel the same. She thought he kept distance for a reason. She thought she was imagining the connection. She thought she would disrupt his peace if she spoke up. He stepped closer, his expression softer than she had ever seen. He told her that sometimes the strongest feelings are the quiet ones, the ones people hide because they matter too much. He said he hid his feelings because he feared losing her friendship, losing her trust, losing the gentle comfort she brought to his life. The truth settled between them in a warm yet fragile silence. For the first time, they were standing in the open without any walls, without any fear guiding their decisions. They were two people who finally revealed the emotions they carried for years, emotions that shaped their distance, their silence, and their longing. The moment felt delicate, almost sacred. Still, Sandra asked the question that echoed inside her heart. She asked him what would happen now. Keanu breathed slowly as he looked at her with a mixture of tenderness and sadness. He held her hands gently and told her the truth she was not ready to hear. He said that even though they finally spoke, even though they finally revealed everything, he still had to leave. The project was still waiting. The commitment remained. The uncertainty of his return was still real. Sandra felt her heart sink painfully. She asked him why he came now if he knew he still had to go. Keanu replied that he did not want to leave without giving her the truth, without letting her know what she meant to him, without making sure the last memory they shared was honest. He said he came because he could not carry silence anymore. He came because he wanted her to know she was the one person he trusted with his heart. And then his voice softened in a way that broke her silently. He said he did not expect anything from her. He did not expect a promise. He did not expect a future. He only wanted her to remember one thing. He said that no matter where he goes, no matter how far he travels, no matter how long their distance becomes, she would always be the person he returned to in his thoughts when the world felt heavy. Sandra felt tears slip down her cheeks, silent and warm. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. Keanu reached up gently and wiped one tear with his thumb, his touch soft and comforting. Then he whispered that the day was not over yet. He still had one more place to take her. One place he had been saving for the final moment of their day. A place that held a truth she had never known. A place he had never shown anyone. And as he took her hand and led her back toward the car, Sandra felt her heart beating with a mixture of fear, hope, and the uncertainty of what awaited her next. She knew whatever that place was, it would reveal something that would change the meaning of this entire day. The drive felt longer than usual as Sandra sat quietly beside Keanu, her fingers resting lightly against the charm he returned to her, and the letter that still carried the warmth of his truth. The road curved gently through quiet streets as the late afternoon light softened into a gentle shade of gold. Keanu kept his eyes on the road, but she could sense that his thoughts were swirling just as deeply as hers. There was a heaviness in the air, not uncomfortable, but filled with meaning, almost as if the day itself understood how important this final moment was. Sandra wanted to speak, wanted to ask where he was taking her, but something in his calm expression told her that this place mattered too much for small questions. She watched him with careful eyes, noticing the softness in his jaw, the slow, steady breathing, the quiet determination in the way he held the steering wheel. He looked like a man who carried both fear and hope in equal measure, and that fragile balance touched her in a way she did not expect. Finally, the car turned onto a narrow road that led to a quiet, gated area. Keanu entered a code, and the gate opened slowly, revealing a private path lined with tall trees that moved gently with the wind. The world felt quieter here, almost distant from everything else. Sandra looked around with curiosity as they continued down the path until the road opened into a large, peaceful garden with a single wooden bench in the center. Beyond the bench was a small lake reflecting the pale colors of the sky. Keanu parked the car and stepped out slowly. Sandra followed him, feeling her heart beat harder with every step. The place felt hidden, untouched, almost sacred in its stillness. She walked beside him until they reached the bench, and he gestured for her to sit. She did, and he joined her, the silence between them soft but filled with anticipation. She asked him quietly what this place was, and he looked at the lake for a long moment before answering. He said this was where he came whenever life felt too heavy, too loud, too confusing. This was where he sat during moments when he needed clarity, needed quiet, needed a place to breathe without the world watching. He said he discovered it early in his career and kept it hidden for years because it was the one place where he allowed himself to feel everything freely without fear. The confession made Sandra's chest warm with tenderness. She realized he had brought her to the most vulnerable place he knew, a place he never shared with anyone, a place that held pieces of his heart that he did not show to the world. He turned to her slowly and said he brought her here today because he wanted his final moment with her to be somewhere honest, somewhere peaceful, somewhere that reflected what she meant to him. She breathed deeply, her eyes warming with emotion she tried to control. She asked him quietly what he needed to say in this place, and Keanu took a slow breath before speaking. He said that he did not want to leave her with fear or sadness. He did not want their last day to feel like an ending. Instead, he wanted it to feel like a truth they finally accepted, a truth that would live inside both of them even if distance separated their days. He said he knew their lives were complicated. He knew timing was unkind. He knew the future was uncertain. But he also knew that his connection with her was something he could never replace. He said he wanted her to remember that love did not always demand a future. Sometimes love simply asked to be acknowledged, respected, and held gently in the heart. Sandra looked at him with trembling eyes, feeling her chest tighten in a way that made breathing difficult. She felt the weight of his honesty and the softness of his vulnerability. She told him in a quiet voice that love did not need to be loud or dramatic to be real. She said she felt it too, felt it in small moments, in their shared silence, in the comfort of their presence, in the way her heart always softened around him. She said she did not know what their future looked like, but she knew what her heart felt in this moment. Keanu's eyes softened deeply as he listened. He reached for her hand slowly, and she allowed her fingers to settle into his as naturally as breathing. Their hands rested together in the quiet breeze, warm and steady, as if the world around them had paused to hold the moment still. He whispered that he did not want their story to end here, even if he had to leave. He wanted to carry this truth with him, wanted to remember her in the quiet of long nights, wanted to hold onto the warmth of this day during the lonely months ahead. He said that no matter where he went, she would always have a place inside his heart. Sandra felt tears rise again, but she let them fall this time, not out of pain, but out of the deep emotional truth of the moment. She told him that she would wait for him in the quiet ways that matter, not with expectation or pressure, but with care and respect. She told him she would think of him whenever the world felt too heavy, whenever she needed strength, whenever she needed a reminder of human kindness. Keanu leaned slightly closer, their foreheads meeting gently, the warmth of their breath mingling as silence held their connection. It was a moment that felt too delicate to touch, too profound for words, too meaningful to interrupt. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other gently with nothing but their quiet closeness. When they finally pulled away, Keanu looked at her with a deep calm, accepting the truth they shared. He told her he needed to leave soon because his flight was scheduled earlier than he expected. The words hit her chest with a painful sting, but she nodded slowly, knowing their goodbye was inevitable. They walked back to the car with a calm silence, their hands still lightly touching. On the drive to her home, she memorized the shape of his profile, the softness of his eyes, the way he breathed when he was thinking. She wanted to carry those details with her, wanted to save them like a quiet treasure buried inside her heart. When they reached her home, Keanu stepped out slowly and walked her to the porch. The sun was almost gone now, leaving a faint glow in the sky that made the moment feel even more fragile. Sandra turned to face him, her heart heavy yet full. She asked him softly if this was goodbye. He looked down for a moment, then lifted his eyes with a gentle sadness. He said it was not goodbye, it was simply the start of a different chapter. A chapter where distance would test them but truth would guide them. A chapter where their connection would live quietly, growing through memory and respect. A chapter that did not promise forever but promised honesty. Sandra stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him, holding him with a tenderness that came from years of unspoken feelings. He held her just as tightly, his breath warm against her shoulder. It was not a romantic embrace seeking a future. It was a human embrace holding everything they shared in the quiet space between their hearts. When they finally let go, Keanu whispered thank you in a voice that shook slightly, and she whispered the same. He stepped back slowly, memorizing her one last time, then walked toward his car. She watched him as he opened the door, paused, and looked back at her with eyes filled with every unspoken emotion. He whispered her name one last time, softly, almost lovingly. Then he left. The car disappeared down the quiet road, leaving behind a fading trail of sound and a heart full of memory. Sandra stood alone for a long moment, letting the silence wrap around her. She pressed the small silver charm against her heart, then looked at the folded letter in her hand. The wind moved gently around her, almost as if carrying his presence with it. She breathed slowly, deeply, feeling both the ache of his absence and the warmth of his truth. She whispered into the quiet air that she would not forget, and in that moment she knew she never would. Their story did not end. It simply lived quietly, respectfully, honestly, in the parts of the heart that never let go.